When Clive Myrie began presenting Mastermind, he rather fancied that, were he a contestant sitting nervously in the fabled black chair on the iconic half-century-old quiz show, his specialist subject would be jazz or the American presidency. 12 months on, the veteran BBC newsreader and world affairs correspondent is in absolutely no doubt as to how he would fare were he to step out across the darkened studio to the sound of the aptly named theme, Approaching Menace. "I've never really believed I could function as a contestant on Mastermind," Myrie admits with a laugh. "I've seen the pressure they've faced over the last year as I've been presenting the show. It's Britain's toughest quiz. There's no conferring, Therese, no one you can lean on, it's just you and your brain and me, the interrogator. I would never, ever claim that I seriously could sit in that black chair." It was on September 11, 1972, 50 years ago tomorrow, that the BBC screened the first episode of what is now one of the longest-running programmes on British television. The format has barely changed since the late Magnus Magnusson hosted the initial series, which was followed by a radio version with Peter Snow, then a short-lived run on the Discovery Channel chaired by Clive Anderson before a triumphant return to BBC Two in 2003, where today's fearsome interrogator John Humphreys anchored the programme for 18 years before finally handing over to Bolton-born Myrie. The specialist subject areas chosen by the contestants remain as varied and as willfully random as ever, but Myrie is quick to banish any arguments topics might sometimes be overly obscure. "Arcane is in the eye of the beholder," he insists. For the contender, it's something they love and have been passionate about for years and years. "I love that you're getting a bit of a window into the minds of the British public, what they know and what they're thinking about and focusing on." But Myrie, more used to anchoring the primetime BBC News or reporting, memorably, from the war in Ukraine earlier this year, does admit that sometimes Mastermind can prove a challenge even to its host. "The toughest rounds for me are ones where I have to get pronunciations of place names correct," he confesses. "In the last series, I had to make sure I got the phrasing right for the Welsh towns that were involved in the Rebecca riots, which was a social uprising by farmers in the early 1840s. Then there were cycling routes and destinations in France for one specialist subject and the geography of Switzerland. These can be tricky, but I'm always game for it." When the show's creator Bill Wright wrestled with the style and tone of the quiz, he looked back to the 3 grueling years he spent as a war prisoner of the Gestapo. His Nazi captors' demands for name, rank and serial number morphed into the curt instructions for contestants to supply name, occupation and specialist subject, with Magnusson and his successors billed as the interrogator. Dealing with pressured environments is something Myrie has more experience than most. From his beginnings in radio and television news covering conflicts in Belfast and Algeria in the early 1990s, he has gone on to be the BBC's man in the front line of wars in far-flung places, ranging from Liberia to East Timor to, most recently, Ukraine. With more than a quarter of a century's experience of reporting in dangerous places, he believes that the nature of war has noticeably changed during his career. "Several of my colleagues have died in Ukraine by simply trying to tell the story of a war and inform people of what is going on in their world," he says. "One of the main things that has changed is how different sides at war have developed from issuing propaganda to what I would now call issuing outright lies, literally saying that black is white. Seeing that has made me even more stubborn in my quest to get to the truth. Some of the memories of the past 6 months of brutal warfare have left an indelible print on Myrie's mind, as he recounts with no small degree of emotion. The column of burnt-out Russian military vehicles in Bucha really stuck with me. There were bodies of charred Russian soldiers still inside the tanks. But it's always the attacks on the defenseless that stick with me the most. It's the attacks on residential areas where there are no soldiers, no military installations at all. These are areas that are simply attacked to sow panic and fear and put pressure on the authorities to change their war posture. It made me want to stay in Ukraine after Russian troops invaded. Propaganda was coming from both sides, and the public has a right to get a fair and balanced idea of what's going on. The danger is that propaganda from both sides can end up drowning out anyone trying to get to the actual truth. If people like me aren't there trying to do that, what is the point of the BBC? There is no point to the BBC. Currently living in London with his wife Catherine, a furniture restorer and upholsterer, Myrie's lifestyle is several universes removed from his father who, back in Bolton, worked for British Leyland making car batteries after emigrating to Britain from Jamaica. But despite his enormous success, his position as one of the BBC's most respected newsreaders, correspondents and now quizmasters, and one of Britain's most famous black faces, it is far from a case of job done. Citing Sir Trevor MacDonald as his earliest influence, "He was the only person I saw on telly who looked like me." Myrie is adamant the UK's broadcast media needs to go much further diversity-wise, and not just in terms of front-of-camera faces. "It's not just about the colour of your skin," he says. "You've got to have social mobility in terms of social class too. I think where much more effort is needed in broadcasting is behind the scenes." I'm talking about the positions of higher executives and the people who make the decisions. There needs to be change in the technical establishment as well. We need far more diversity in terms of producers and directors. There's work to be done. We're funded by the levy, the license fee. And if we're not representing as much of a cross-section of the public as possible, then we're not justifying our existence. It's a surprisingly bold statement for the BBC employee, who has no plans to follow his former colleague Andrew Marr, who claimed he felt frustrated about having to self-censor his opinions, into private sector broadcasting. "I rant about a whole host of things, I can assure you," Myrie smiles. "But I don't let my views be known by all and sundry on social media because that's not the point of me on this earth, I don't think. The point of me is to report as factually and truthfully as possible and to have a more informed citizenry who can then make their own decisions about their lives." But whichever dangerous part of the world he reports from next, I'm particularly interested in the civil conflict in Ethiopia at the moment, which has mostly gone under the radar. He tells me, it is clear Myrie will mostly be keeping his personal views about politics to himself. Yet for a man who has spent his entire career focusing on just the facts, when it comes to his, and other journalists', role in public life, he can be noticeably vociferous. "Nobody cares about my opinions," he concludes. "I'm just a bloke. Why should a housewife in Pinner want to know my opinions about anything? Some journalists do want to get their point of view out there, but that's not what I'm about. I don't see the BBC ever allowing me to have my own newspaper column or anything like that. And honestly, I don't think he'd want them to let me have such a thing happen. It's just not part of my makeup to just bang on about what I think about something. Mastermind marks its 50th birthday tomorrow. A new series comes to BBC Two later this month. Ukraine's musical Freedom Fighters with Clive Myrie is available on BBC iPlayer. Don't miss tomorrow's Sunday Express for my dad Magnus Magnuson.